wonderful. It is joyful to be in a room again with so many people and to see your faces and your eyes and not to be peering into a little screen. It makes such a difference, and you're all very, very welcome. Thank you very much for coming. And tonight we launch that new strategy.
I think we clearly see that inequality is being heightened more than ever. We've had a succession of crises, but the one common factor is those that are disadvantaged are suffering the most. Our mission, as Keith said, has always been to provide the kind of funding that that local charity sector needs, both today and for the long term. But even more than that, arguably, the time of crisis is the best time to be planning for the future. For me, one of the most important parts is we're making firm commitments in this, coming back every year and telling you what we're doing about these commitments. These are going to be at the heart of everything that we do in the Community Foundation. Issues like how we address poverty and disadvantage and inequality. It's no accident our headline is a fairer, more equal Sussex. We want that to be up front and centre in everything that we do. We want to promote equity, diversity and inclusion, and we want to help local communities to address climate change. So I hope some of these issues we'll be talking about in your questions very shortly. But most importantly, let's keep working together, let's keep planning, acting in the community, but keep dreaming for the future about the better world that we want to build together. Thank you very much.
Kevin, thank you very much. I'm David Dimbleby, and the point of this roundtable discussion today is to give all of you, either donors or recipients, a chance to challenge and question the aspirations that Kevin has been describing. I would like, at any point, any of you who want to comment on what's said by the panel, to get hold of a microphone and put your point of view.
I think you need money in all different sizes and shapes and ability to reach for the greatest reach. Actually, somebody starting off needs a couple of thousand, but they need the couple of thousands very quickly on a rolling program, and then it builds. And you build those skills and knowledge so that ultimately that organisation is able to access bigger grants beyond 10,000 and out into the community. So you get that constant investment.
For us, we've got quite a large pot in total. So $250,000 is what's in our fund at the moment. And so we're trying to work out the best way to spend that money, which could be one large donation, of course, or it could be multiple small donations. What we've learned through that process is there are over 100 charities just in Brighton and Hove dealing with homelessness. And so just as you said, we've learned that there are some very big players and there are some very small charities as well.
I can't believe there are 100 charities in Brighton dealing with homelessness.
Yeah.
But is that efficient? I mean, does that make any sense at any level?
Well, I think it's, I can see some people in the network who are part of it. I guess, there are some very small charities dealing with some very specific issues. As a donor coming in and wanting to make a difference over and above just funding, a food bank to deal with that issue or a soup kitchen there and then, it's almost an overwhelming choice of where can you give your money to actually make the best long-term impact. I think in terms of your question, though, I would agree with what Becky said in terms of what we've seen so far, which is some of those charities don't need £250,000 today, and perhaps that wouldn't be the most effective way to give the money. So I can see that there are some that need small donations for small ideas and projects and experimental projects as well. So that's the other interesting thing that we're trying to flush out at the moment. What are the ideas that are unfunded that might have a longer term impact?
I think the longest amount of commitment that we can make, we understand the huge difference that makes, and part of the reason that councils understand it is exactly what we say to government. But I think the difficulty is, and we're now in our third year of a one-off settlement, is that we are wary about making commitments that we don't know whether we can stand up to.
And presumably you don't want to make charities too comfortable because you want to keep them on their toes.
I don't. I don't think that either of the county councils has ever worked in that way.
Karina?
As a donor, I would say yes, absolutely. I think from a donor's perspective, it helps with the cash flow, but you can make a broader, longer term commitment. So as a business as well, I think that's great for our staff as well. And they like to be committed to charities for a few years. So as a donor, I think that's a great idea.
Kaveen?
The thing that we hear, I think, across the picture of our community foundations and the groups that they support is longer term unrestricted funding. This is what people want, and we understand that. Of course, it's a challenge because we're in a pattern of working. We're in a culture of how we give, I think, in community foundations. But I think it's the right challenge. For example, funding for projects for a number of grassroots organisations can be easier to come by than funding for your core costs. Your core costs essentially is what you're doing on the day-to-day, the big picture, the strategic view of what you're doing. The challenge often that we see with project-based funding is small organisations have to fit what they're doing to a structure, to a project, to a rationale, which isn't necessarily linked to, back to that word of kind of purpose. So unrestricted multi-year funding is a way that can enable charities to work more strategically.
And this is donors saying, I want to specify, I want you, Kevin, to spend the money here, not there. That's the thing that's difficult. Is that right?
Yes, to an extent, donors, but actually also foundations in themselves, because I think there is a power dynamic within giving often, and we might touch on this a little bit later, but this power dynamic can often lead to prescription. And I think we need to appreciate where expertise lies sometimes in our communities and enable people to use their expertise. And if your expertise is in your community, let's invest in that expertise.
So, Jackie, what do you think?
Yeah, absolutely. Some of the work that I've previously done was 3-year funding, 10K, off you go, and I'll stay in touch with you as you develop. That was a domestic abuse charity that 10 years later has got a turnover of 750,000 and 67 volunteers, and through the pandemic supported 1,200 people across both genders. Oh, because we did set that at the start. So you set some criteria at the start that's very wide, but you let the community get on with it and they will deliver for you no end, and you will get your social return. So it's about actually just being a little bit more flex and open and saying, actually, that's a great idea, let's go, and making it as easy as possible for those groups to bed in, develop and establish themselves. So absolutely. And also what they should do, that money should actually inflate. I've found one funder that's actually come back to us and said, actually, you can have 11.1% more on your grant, on your 3-year grant. That is amazing. But it shouldn't be amazing, it should be the norm.
So I think that's a really interesting question. I think the simple answer, as Hannah at the back will tell you, our head of grants, is that we do a lot of that. I mean, in every application that comes in, we're looking at how are you working with other organisations? Are you working in partnership? That's one of our key criteria, is are you working with other organisations or are you duplicating? So yes, we have a certain role in that. I don't think we have a role in saying, you two charities, you go and merge. We might say, go and talk to each other, put people in touch. And I suppose that's partly an event like this gives people the chance to meet each other and talk and see whether they can work together.
Quick point from you, ma'am.
Thank you. So I'm Cheryl from Sussex Pathways. I'm putting that out there because I will get told off by one of my trustees if I don't. We have benefited from you over the years so much, and you have really kept us afloat in really hard times at times. One of the things that the lady said over there about too many charities and some merging charities, as a small charity, we work with probably another two dozen charities, but we all do things slightly different, and we all pick up each other's cases because we all work with people in a different way.
What is your charity briefly?
So my charity works in reducing reoffending and rehabilitation of offenders. There's lots of charities out there that work with us and sort of next to us, but they don't do exactly what we do. They do things slightly different. So we can go to those and say, actually, we've done all this. Can you pick this person up now?
Make a difference versus solve. I think that's an important distinction to start with. I think that one of the good things about philanthropy is the concept of risk. The good thing about a funder like this is that it's independent, not perhaps without bias, but independent. And what philanthropy can enable is risk-taking that statutory partners will shy away from at times. And I think the power, the thing that at UKCF we're really excited about is not so much about a solution being presented, but what can we learn from the risks that community foundations, that independent funders, that the voluntary sector can take? And how do we translate that into learning that can influence the system? So can it make a difference? Yes. Can it solve a problem in and of itself? No, but I think it can be a catalyst for change.
Can I answer
Yes.
that as well? So I think as a donor as well, and the work that we're trying to do, I think that concept of risk is really interesting, because I think what we're learning through the process that we're going through is that some of the help that we can give that can make a really big difference, perhaps to homelessness in Brighton, is not going to solve the problem, but perhaps it's actually helping, putting some money and time and resources into helping those 100 charities work more effectively together. So some of the so-called non-sexy projects like data gathering, how they really connect as a network, how they work together, how they exchange information, that's really coming through as a very strong area that would have a multiplier effect. And it's not that expensive for us to help them with that. So I think as a donor, it's been an interesting journey to become very agnostic about what we give money towards, but to listen to the network and the community to see actually what we can make a difference with them. And as the lady said, it's not easy for them to find funding for things like that, but we're willing to take that risk perhaps with them and try that.
I think it's absolutely key that the money just lands where it's kind of needed and it has a real impact, and that where it's needed is core costs. And actually that's a complete sea change from the new sexy project that people are inventing, because the time and energy to do the applications and to dream up the new project just distracts sometimes from delivery. Yeah. And we need to flip it and say, actually, core is what we want to fund. Because core, if you get core right, then actually you may get the space to be able to tweak it, change it, develop it, move it forward. But that's a sea change. That's an absolute sea change for funders to get their head around. But if it doesn't happen, a lot of organisations, particularly now, and particularly through the next year and a half, will really struggle to survive.
I mean, certainly I've met with the youth cabinets and the Children in Care Council of both local authorities in the last week. So if you listen to those, and they are incredibly interesting and interested people, they will want to talk about the planet, and they will want to talk about mental health and the legacy of COVID.
Is there, I mean, this room is mainly, dare I say it, over 30. Is that a fair point? Or maybe 40. I'm over 80, so I'm entitled to say that. So is there going to be, I mean, given the economic circumstances we're now in, given the difficulties young people are having, getting a job, finding a flat, bringing up a family, is the whole tenor of philanthropy, which seems to lie with people who have a bit of money to spare and want to do something with it. That's how it seems to me the Sussex Foundation works. Is that all going to crumble over the next decade if the world goes on as it is? I mean, what do you think, Kevin?
We're on the verge of a huge transfer of wealth from one generation to the next. As the baby boomers pass on their wealth to their children in the next 10, 20, 30 years, if you like. So a lot of people are going to be coming into properties that their parents have been living in, and there'll be a huge transfer of wealth, but actually people of fairly modest income at the moment. But it may well be they don't get that until they're in their 40s or 50s themselves. So there is going to be a huge transfer of wealth between generations, but it may be quite late in people's lives. So young people may have a very challenging few decades ahead of them, I suppose. But I think the key thing is, I think, as Becky said, the kind of things that younger people are concerned about are the climate change and the planet and mental health and issues like that. And we're certainly seeing that impact because a lot of the donors that we're working with have children in their 20s and 30s. And certainly what the issues that their children are raising with them are those very issues. So I think there is a change in the character of the kind of issues people want to support already, and that will accelerate further.
I mean, I would just add, I think I talked about the subject, but I also see in those generations that are coming through a generosity of spirit and a sense of injustice and equity and a celebration of diversity and inclusion that would lead me really, really hopeful for the future, as long as we as this generation make sure that we work with them in a way that means they feel heard and makes them see us using the very best of their talents and their efforts, even if they're not in a position to do the financial contributions that some of us have been able to do. So I think it's a real challenge to us as well as to them. Well, I can't comment on behalf of the foundation. I'll leave that to Kevin. But what I would say is that we, in both authorities, have a very strong commitment to both understanding the challenges that are facing everybody, and that we think that having a good, strong evidence base, which is based on lived experience, is really important, and we absolutely fundamentally build that in. We are part of the integrated care system, working with health colleagues and with the voluntary sector, and through that we will make sure that we have got that strong evidence base, that we build on it and we make it available to other people as is needed. We have done some particular work as a set of partners looking at the impact of COVID on different groups, particularly race, but actually a whole series of groups, and also we'll continue to do the cost of living, because we understand that for the poorer that the impact is greater.
I think it's a really interesting question. Looking at this strategy, I was really excited to see how equity, diversity and inclusion is sort of woven throughout it. But I think it is a challenge for any organisation, for this organisation, to turn those commitments into a tangible, impactful reality.
What charities want most is sustainable funding year on year. We've talked about it, haven't we? Multi-year funding, unrestricted funding. That comes from having an endowment fund. That's how we can provide that ongoing funding, because the money is committed, it's invested, it's there year on year, and it's there for the next generation as well as it is for today. It's also a way that a lot of people want to give.
Could I just say a big thank you to the panel on all your behalves for coming and fielding all these questions, and I know they'll be around if you want to talk to them more during the next half hour or so until we close at 8 o'clock. So I'm very grateful to them and thank you very much.